A webinar participant asked, how do you test your assumptions when you have to serve everyone? Right? So one of the things that we look at with assumption testing is who's our target customer segment, and that's who we want to test with. Well, in this case, the webinar participant is saying we work on government services. Literally, we have to serve everyone. Okay, the first thing I want to say is if you don't work in government services, your product probably doesn't serve everyone, right? And even in government services, there's probably segments of your population that are more important to test with than others. So for example, if you're rolling out, let's say, a new vaccination program and you need to figure out how to communicate with the public at large, yes, your communication needs to reach everyone, but you probably have ideas of segments that are more or less important than others. So for example, you might find that you really have to make sure your communication works for people where English is their second language, or they have limited English, or maybe you have underrepresented folks or people who are more skeptical of vaccines. So I'd argue even in the public sector, when you might want to reach everybody, it may not be necessary to test your assumptions with everybody. And so part of that is going to depend on your solution, on the service that you're offering, who you need to reach. So the first thing I would ask is, do we really need to test with everybody, or are there some populations that are more important to test with than others? I would argue for most services, first of all, it's going to be hard to test with everybody. Of course, if everybody is visiting your website about your service or is engaging with you through an in-person service like a DMV or through a voting poll, you actually might be able to use those opportunities to test with a wide swath of people. But most of the time, we can get more targeted in our testing, where we can say, okay, across all of the people that we need to reach, where do we think there's more risk? And then how do we run assumption tests specifically with the populations where there's more risk? And I know, especially in public sector, we do have community outreach teams where they're focused on exactly these questions, making sure that we're reaching underserved populations, making sure that our services are accessible, right? So there's probably already resources that you can tap into, but you don't have to test your assumptions with every single segment in your population. You can look at where is the most risk and focus there. If you're new to assumption testing, be sure to check out the article in the post where you can dive in more to learn more about this idea. And then if you work in the public sector, if you work for a government service, or if you are testing assumptions across a really broad population, do me a favor, share your best tips in the comments below. I'd love to explore more about how this is working in practice.